Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us on The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Khalil. Today we're discussing the topic of athlete jersey sales based on an article that Morning Chalk Up recently published. It revealed that athletes, they do not see any proceeds from those jerseys. On our episode today, we have staff writer and sports analyst Patrick Clark. Jason St. Clair, he's a Major League Baseball certified agent, a representative for games athletes, and founder of Lab Management. And we have Justin Cotler. He's the owner and head coach of Underdogs Athletics, training several games athletes. Now, compiling the story and after talking to several games athletes, many did wish to remain anonymous, but we were hearing frustration when it came to their name, image, and likeness. And in CrossFit, in this case, the game sponsor Noble, they monetize as they see fit. Now, this is something that it's been a topic that surrounded the sport, even when Reebok was the game sponsor, and they too didn't pay the athletes for their jersey sales. But let's go back to the publicity release waiver that every athlete signs at the beginning of the season. What do you each think the biggest issue with that waiver is that everybody is signing?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren, Patrick, for having me. That issue right there, I think there's just a lack of education from the athlete perspective of that not knowing exactly what they're signing.
Mm.
For me specifically, one thing that always stands out is the movies that CrossFit makes, right? Those movies, they're making a ton of money on whether it's on Netflix or iTunes or, I've seen it on an airplane, right? That CrossFit is making all that money and the athlete's image likeness is there and being used and they're not being paid for that. I think that's like one thing in that contract that they're not understanding what they're giving up by signing that, along with jersey sales as well, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there, but those two stand out to me specifically.
Mm.
Yeah, Jason brings up a good point. I'm just like anything, you don't read the terms and conditions and you're just signing away things. And it's been like that for a while now. No one's really paid attention to it. So, I think this is now people are paying attention thanks to your article that you wrote, Lauren, and with the help of, Jason and Justin as well. But yes, there change needs to happen maybe with that simple wordage and maybe altering some of the term agreements that you're signing away right when you start the open.
I think what it brings up for me is the fact that who do we have that's advocating for the athletes, right? Like ultimately, we need people who can help. At the end of the day, right? Like it's not like the athletes are that adept when it comes to fishing through a contract. So ultimately, and you have a lot of athletes who maybe aren't lucky to have a Jason, right? Who ultimately are signing things and they don't really have anybody who's assisting them. So I think it really brings up that need, for something like the PFAA to really take another big step. And I was lucky enough to be on a call with them recently, and it really looks like they're making some headway. So ultimately, that's, to me, it's just like, okay, we need to advocate for the athletes big time.
Jason, you brought up a point when we're looking at name, image, and likeness. There's so many different things that fall under this category. Sure, jerseys is included, but also, when they're in CrossFit documentaries or when their face is on a poster. As people in this space, do you guys think that athlete jerseys are what coaches and athletes should be looking to get more money on? I mean, if you look at the off-season competitions and the games, first place takes 42% of that prize purse, where when you look at sports like golf, the first place winner, they only take about 18% of that total prize purse. So is the jersey sales really where the community should be putting their efforts in to get more money for athletes?
I think, Lauren, great question. I think that's the simple solution right now to this question. That's really it, because I'm going to just speak to MLB. I'm a certified baseball agent. They have a Major League Players Association. Okay. So think of that like as the middleman between the players and the teams. Okay. They're really a lot of maybe ex-players, but they're attorneys that have written the CBA, which is the collective bargaining agreement. So those are the terms, like that's why they're on lockout right now. They're not agreeing to those terms. Okay. But it's a spokesperson for the players to the teams and vice versa. Okay. But there's a licensing agreement within that CBA. Anything you see with an MLB logo, okay, just to simplify this, it goes into a pool, and regardless if you're Mike Trout or Patrick Clark, okay, you're getting the same amount of money in a licensing fee check every season. Okay, so an example, we use the number 50K. Say the players are going in spring training and they're on the MLB roster, they're going to get a licensing check for $50,000 just so they can be, teams can use their name, image, and likeness. Okay. Now, follow, to the next year, based on those sales, those licensing fees will go up. So those checks will get bigger if their sales do great. So to answer your question, I think the simple solution, I think it should be a focus for CrossFit athletes because I guarantee they make a lot of money on those jersey sales. I've bought one before and I represent the athletes, right? But that would be my thoughts on it.
Yeah. First time you'll ever hear Mike Trout and Patrick Clark in the same sentence.
I like that little comparative.
Exactly. I played some t-ball, so we're good. You're
making a lot of money now, Pat.
I was going to say Barry Bonds, but that's a hot topic right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. It is definitely a pathway for the athletes to make more money. And, obviously CrossFit, they use the athletes for everything they do just look at social media, for example. If you go to the regular CrossFit page or the CrossFit Games page or the CrossFit training page, any CrossFit page, you're going to see them pushing an image or a video. And what are they using? They're using an athlete. So they're monetizing that. The athlete's not getting anything out of that because of what they signed right at the start of the Open. And, they need to get a cut of that. How much that is, I don't know. That's for smarter people. Like I said, Jason brought up an example of Major League Baseball, but there's other professional sports that have different levels of percentages based on how popular that sport is. But I totally agree with what Jason says there. Not about the Mike Trout and Patrick Clark comparisons, but more along the lines is that these athletes need some type of cut. The question is, what percentage of that cut do they get?
I'm going to piggyback off that because honestly, the first time that this really kind of came to my attention was back in 2016 when the affiliate that I own, CrossFit Dynamics, had a pretty highly visible team at the games. And we walked into the shop at the games and there were Team Dynamics jerseys that they were selling. So to me, it's even a bigger issue. It's not just athletes; it's also affiliates. It's the lifeblood of CrossFit. It's especially with the new regime that's in place, right? That is so affiliate driven and affiliate minded. And to me, it's like, okay, well, we need to compensate the athletes, but we also need to take care of our affiliates as well. And we need to figure this out all the way from the top to the bottom, right? So it's a bigger issue than just the athletes, in my opinion.
So when it comes to where folks like yourself should be putting in the effort to advocate for athletes, do you in fact think that it should start with figuring out how athletes will get paid for their name, image, or likeness, or from money that they could potentially win at these competitions and maybe more evenly distributing the pot among, from first place to 15th or 20th, etc.?
I'll go back to, I still think it's a simple solution, but I also want to piggyback off what Justin just said. He said top to bottom, and I kind of say like the ecosystem. By doing this is a solution to support the whole ecosystem, right? So these athletes too aren't just entitled to jersey sales. There's a partnership here, right? CrossFit Games gave them life. Okay, we know that, but also the athletes give CrossFit Games life. So it's a partnership, right? But it's an equal, and this isn't a traditional sport. MLB players have guaranteed money. They don't need the jersey sales, right? But it's fair. Okay. But in CrossFit, when I started doing this in 2012, 13, there wasn't any reference to stats or peers or to go to CrossFit and say, hey, this is what Camila Blanc-Bazinet should be making, right? So we had to base it off social media. How can we help her make enough money where she can go and train all day? She's a full-time student and she's teaching classes, but how can she compete at that level without having some sort of income, okay, and not work? And so that's where it comes down to is this is a partnership and it supports the ecosystem. And this is a simple solution is to provide them some money so that they can have that to train all day, every day, and give us the entertainment we want.
I agree with Jason. That is a solution, but I think you won't see that solution until, and please, I'd love to hear Jason and Justin's thoughts on this, until the athletes actually stand up for themselves. Like in the article that you wrote, we only had one athlete come out on record, Caroline Prevost, to say something. But we all know collectively that these athletes are complaining. They're bringing up these things, but none of them are willing to step up and put their name on something and make that complaint. So, I mean, is that how we try to resolve this, or at least get the athletes to the table? Is actually having these athletes come out and say, "Hey, I am not happy," whether it be the Rich Froning of the world to the Ellie Turners. All these athletes need to come up and speak out. I mean, Jason, Justin, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, so it was one of the topics of conversation when we discussed, when we had our meeting with the PFAA. This was on the list, and I think ultimately, what the athletes really want is an open line of communication with CrossFit. I think historically it hasn't been really easy, guys. I mean, if we're being honest, and it seems like right now that door has opened a bit more. So ultimately, now is really a great time to start to bring up this issue and others as well, right? And to make it better, and to create a better opportunity for athletes, but also to create a better relationship between CrossFit and athletes. And I think this is just one of the many issues. But ultimately, to me, it's communication. It's these are the list of things that we know we need to attack in the sport, and we need to create solutions for. But we need help, right? Like, it's one thing to stand up, but if the door is shut to you, that's another thing. So ultimately, it's got to be a symbiotic relationship, and I think it seems like it's starting to go that way a little bit more. But I think this topic is one that's really important to publicize, because I think if these things are always kind of hush hush, then they're never going to get solved.
Mm. And although the sport is still new relative to the NFL, the MLB, and some of the other sports, it is something that we're trying to make more professional. And part of that is the athletes getting paid. After the publication of the piece, a representative from Noble actually reached out to me, and they stated that they actually took a loss for those jerseys that they sold, but they thought that it was just the right thing to do by producing them to support the athletes and marketing their presence for the future. And they are looking to, maybe come next year, actually having the athletes get paid to them. It seemed like it was more of a timing thing between becoming the sponsor for the CrossFit Games. Do you think that between the new regime and even having like the new sponsor for the games, that door will open more for communication, and that there will be active change for the athletes when it comes to name, image, and likeness?
Sure. So really quick on Patrick, I think with the old regime or the ownership, athletes there's a little scare tactic there. So I think they're afraid to speak up. I think also they looked at it as like, don't bite the hand that feeds me, which I can understand. I've been in that position, so I can see that. But what Justin said with this new regime, I think, and I met with Justin Berg at the Wadapalooza, it's like, you have a clean landscape here to truly fix all of this with your mouth. Like, just communicate what your vision is, what you want to do, how you want to change this, and you'll have those athletes. You'll have what you need, from them. Just communicate to them, and work with them. So, Eric comes from technology. It'd be really easy to set up just like an app and communicate with all the games athletes, right? If you don't have a union. But to answer your question about Noble, if there was great communication and those athletes knew they were getting proceeds on theirs, why wouldn't they do like a rev share kind of type post? Because then they wouldn't have taken a loss on those jerseys. They would have been a lot more sold, so there's a solution to that. And just saying we took a loss, I think if they would have communicated they were going to get some of that, then they would have blown it up, and the community again will support it.
I think Jason, you just brought up a great point, because you're going to hear this comparison a lot between the games and the Rogue Invitational. One of the main things about the Rogue Invitational this year, what did they say? They said everything was coming back to the athletes. So they got a percentage of the ticket sales. They got a percentage of a lot of things at the Rogue Invitational. So I don't know if that helped, but it certainly didn't hurt.
Sure.
But, I know as a fan, I would probably be more inclined to buy a jersey of a favorite athlete, knowing that some of it's going to go back to them. But like I said, that's something maybe Noble should have communicated better, and hopefully they'll learn from that mistake. And it sounds like they are. There's been an open line of communication between Lauren, the Morning Chalk Up, and Noble. So hopefully that's something that will be addressed in the future. But you brought up a great point. Like I said, it comes down to communication. It normally does, doesn't it?
Right. Precise communication, not just communication.
Oh, correct.
Precise.
Yeah, I love what Jason said. I in the article, Lauren, I was a little bit harsh and where I was just like, guys, come on, figure it out. You know what I mean? Like,
Justin, you harsh?
Yeah. No, but at the end of the day, listen, again, it's lead by example. Like you're the sponsor of the games now. It's a situation where, again, we're like advocate for the athletes. Like we want to create a sport where our athletes can be athletes, our athletes can make a living, and we want to take steps forward. And why recycle a lot of the old stuff that was an issue? Like, take the lead. You know what I mean? It shouldn't have to be an article necessarily like this to be able for it. To me, it's like, come on, guys. Like it should be relatively obvious that, I mean, you're using somebody's name, you're using their likeness, you're using, I mean, they need to get a piece, come on.
Well,
I think at this point, right, like, it's time, like, no more excuses. Let's figure out solutions. I don't want to hear any more excuses.
And what do each of you think the bottom line is when it comes to this topic of jersey sales?
Honestly, it's going to be the athletes really stepping up, in a respectful way. And we can do that. And we can sit there and communicate with HQ or Noble or the sponsors, right? This can be done amicably, and we can get this done. They just need to see up the top that this helps the whole ecosystem, right? And how much these CrossFit athletes help affiliates, or people bring them to the gym, or the affiliates, right? Because it's an attainable sport, right? You walk into a CrossFit gym, and if you're good enough, right, or have the potential, you could get to the games. It's not like you can put on spikes and football pads and play in the NFL. You know what I mean? But these athletes give people true hope, right? But they're also changing their lifestyle, their habits. They're creating health for them. And that's part of the ecosystem too. So to answer your question, if we could do this with great communication, but the athletes have to speak up and not be scared, then we can get a solution met.
The bottom line for me is, it's kind of almost piggybacking off what Jason said, is it's the PFAA and the athlete council that CrossFit puts together. What they need to start talking, and then also bring in Noble in that conversation as well. So again, it comes down to communication, whether Noble communicates through CrossFit or they come in independently, but all those people need to be sitting at a table together, and they all need to be communicating. And we're trying to find out the best way forward, not only to make a living as a professional athlete in the sport, but also to move the sport forward as a serious professional sport as well.
I'd say the bottom line for me, especially coming from a coach's perspective, is creating more and more opportunities for athletes. Like, I see these athletes every day in the gym, and I know how hard they work, and I know the time and effort that's put into it. And a lot of people don't realize, like, at this point, if you want to be one of the best in the world, it's a full-time job. And if it's a full-time job, most of them aren't making full-time wages. So anything that we can do to create opportunities, anything that we can do to help generate revenue for the athletes, because it's the domino effect. If they can train like full-time athletes, then the product's going to be better for CrossFit, right? It's going to look better for the spectators. They're going to be able to do these superhuman things that we, have become accustomed to. But that, it's not going to happen if they don't have the opportunity, because they've got to go and coach 8 classes, and they've got to pick up a part-time job and all this stuff. So let's create those opportunities. And I really think that, as Jason said before, we don't have to make it too complicated. There are some simple solutions. Follow the lead of some of these other sports, that have gotten it right over the years. And, I really feel like we can make some serious headway.
Justin, Jason, Patrick, thank you guys all so much for talking openly about this topic. It's something that we like to have open conversation about. So I really appreciate all of your insight. And everybody, thank you for joining The Bottom Line, and we'll see you next time.